Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation for Communications 203. I'm Dr. Reno. My presentation will be on the concept of perception. So let's get started. So the first question is, obviously, what is perception? So let's get into it. Perception is the active process of selecting, organizing, and interpreting people, objects, events, situations, and activities. So in other words, it's how we make sense of the environment around us. Perception and communication go hand in hand. They influence each other because how one individual perceives something will determine how they communicate with others. So our next slide is the processes of perception. So there are three processes of perception. You have selection, organization, and interpretation. So the selection process is the act of selecting what to perceive based off what is going on in your life at the moment. So let's go through a scenario. You walk into your room and your bed isn't made, there's shoes all over the ground, and then from the corner of your eye, you notice a huge pile of laundry just sitting there. You'll immediately notice the pile of laundry because it stands out to you. So you'll overlook the messy bed and all the shoes lying everywhere, and you'll only focus on the big pile of laundry. So we tend to notice things that stand out to us, and in turn, we want to perceive those first. Next, we have our organization process. So when we perceive something, we don't do it randomly. We organize our perceptions into significant ways. So first, we have constructivism, which is a theory in which we organize our experiences by using cognitive schemata. So there's 4 different schematas. You have prototype, personal construct, stereotype, and script. So your prototype is your ideal perception of a certain category. For example, your favorite car would be an example of a prototype. You perceive this specific car to be your favorite because it is your ideal car. Then you have your personal constructs, which is how you perceive someone's personal attributes. So an example would be how you perceive someone to be trustworthy or not. You then have stereotypes, which is a more common understanding of it, which is an example of how someone dresses. So if someone dresses with expensive name brand, you'll categorize them as being wealthy. Scripts, on the other hand, is a guide of how we are supposed to act in certain situations. So an example of a script would be arriving at work and then seeing your boss's first reaction. Your first reaction would be to greet them and say, "Good morning." So it is what is expected of you, and it's almost second nature. Next, we have the interpretation process, which is creating an explanation on the events and occurrences we see. So this is the why to the perception. We use the concept of attribution when trying to answer the question of why someone acts the way they do and why something happened. So sometimes we tend to bias our perception of an event based on our personal interests. And when using self-serving bias, it can alter our perception into not taking responsibility for our own actions. So I may tend to blame my weight gain on working too much and not having enough time to go to the gym. But if I do lose weight, I might say I did a good job at managing my time and then eating clean. Next, we have influences on perception. So there are many types of influences on perception, and these influences determine how we perceive people and occurrences. First, you have your physiological factors. So this includes the 5 senses and our physiological states. So one person may say that something stinks to them, but someone else might actually enjoy the smell of it. And if you are feeling under the weather, you may perceive something in a negative outlook. But if you're having a great day, you might perceive something in a more positive outlook. So all these physiological factors play a part in perception and how we view the environment around us. Next, we have expectations. So expectations set the stage for how we perceive something. For example, your friends may say that this movie that they watched was so amazing and that it was the best movie that they had ever seen. So, but when you go to watch it, your expectations are set very high. So you already perceive this movie as being good before even watching it. Next, we have social roles. Social roles also play a huge part in how we communicate with people based on our perception of them. So when I go meet my friend's mom, I know that she is the governor of our city. So I already perceive her as being important. And I may talk to her in a more professional way when I meet her because of her social status. So digital media and perception. So there are two connections that we form between our digital media and the perceptions we create. So our choice of social media that we choose to follow shapes our perspective on how we see certain views. So for example, Twitter. The people that we follow can actually change how we perceive things. So if I follow Donald Trump, I would have a more Republican view on politics, but if I follow Joe Biden, it might be more of a Democratic view. Secondly, our social groups may affect what we choose to post on social media. So if I'm part of a church group and I attend church regularly, I may tend to post religious content. But if I am part of like a close-knit family, then I may post more pictures of myself and family together at outings. So next is tips on improving perception. So you always want to try and avoid reading others' minds. People tend to communicate with others based on what they think they're feeling or what's on their mind. So we should stop and ask them like how they are feeling before assuming how they feel in a certain situation. You also never want to judge a book by its cover. It's a very famous saying that everyone has. So sometimes we judge people on assumptions instead of getting all the facts before creating a perception of them. So always get all the facts about a person before creating your first impression on them. Next, watch how you use the self-serving bias. So we really have to monitor how much we use a self-serving bias because basing your perception too much off your own bias could create a toxic environment. You may not be able to take the blame for your own actions. Finally, our summary. In this presentation, we learn what perception is, how we process the concept of it, what influences the way we perceive our environment, and how social media choices affect our perceptions. So the way we perceive our environment and the world around it is anything but simple. The idea of perception is so complex that sometimes it can be difficult to fully understand it. Hopefully this presentation allowed for a better understanding of the topic presented. Here is my reference page. And that's it. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video presented.